Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Second show of the day because we woke up to some big news around the NBA, courtesy of Shams Charania of The Athletic. Keith and I are going to break it all down. Before we do, make sure you are subscribing to the NBA Front Office Show right here on YouTube. Don't forget to ring the notification bell. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, make sure you go and give us that 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. We've been getting some great reviews coming in. We're going to read a few of them at the end of the show today, but we really appreciate them so much, and it's a way that you can help out the show. It doesn't take long. Just pop in there, give us that 5-star rating, and then write a little review for us. We love reading them. It's a ton of fun getting that kind of feedback directly from all of you. So if you can do that for us over on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it. Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. All right, Keith. Well, let's get into this, man. We got some big stuff going on today for the middle-ish end of March, where a lot of teams, there's some playoff races going on, but a lot of teams are kind of settling in to where they're at in terms of the standings. There was some surprise here, and I guess let's just start off. Let's not bury the lead. Miami is a landing spot for Bradley Beal this offseason. Where did that come from? I guess not a surprise because Miami tends to be at least mentioned in the race for a lot of the top players. But still, this is one that we heard a lot of the 76ers stuff and a lot of other teams, your Boston Celtics being teams that might be interested in Bradley Beal. But man, if he landed in Miami, that gets pretty interesting in terms of perhaps putting them in another tier compared to the rest of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, for sure. Now, so we're all on the same page here. Beal has a player option, but he will decline that. Almost guaranteed he will decline that player option, which then will make him a free agent. And the reason why he'll decline that is an extension for him is not as lucrative because he's not coming off a high enough number necessary to get in there. So he's probably going to decline that. That gets him to the full max that he can get to. Now, whether that seemed like that would be a lock, that was going to be with Washington, and that's where he would stick. Now, for what it's worth, let's be fair, he has continually said he doesn't have any interest in going anywhere, and recently said that too, shortly before he was shut down for the season. May have even been like right after, but he basically said, no, this is where I want to be. For Miami to get him, Miami does not have cap space. They have no path to cap space. This would have to be a sign and trade, which then that means that Washington would land into Beal rather would land into a 4-year contract versus the 5-year he can get with the Wizards. Just a sneak peek, probably later today, I'll have a piece up on Spot Track that outlines all of Bradley Beal's contract options. If you're interested in reading something before that's posted, I just wrote one about Tyler Hero and all his contract options. And my guess is maybe Tyler Hero factors in here a little bit as part of a trade package for Bradley Beal, because you start to look at it and say, all right, you got to get their matching salary-wise. You got to get their talent-wise. Do you really need Tyler Hero if you're the Heat, if you're going to get Bradley Beal? Sure, you'd love him for depth reasons, but you got to start to build up a trade package. So very curious to see how this would come together. I never count Pat Riley out, never count Andy Ellsberg out, because those guys are as good as what they do as anybody there. But let's see. And obviously, first though, Beal would have to say he wants to leave Washington before this can happen.
Yeah, and so far, every time this has come up, every time we've hit that kind of decision point for Bradley Beal, where people have been starting to speculate, might he actually leave Washington? He's ultimately said no. He's ultimately said, no, I prefer to stay, and then off they go. And then Wizards move on, and they try to build around there. I still think that's probably the most likely outcome here, is Bradley Beal once again recommits to Washington, says I want to stay here, does a new deal, and that's where we go from there. But that doesn't mean that teams aren't going to be positioning themselves to be a landing spot should he start to consider really going somewhere else. And Miami could be interesting. Now, we also heard word that the 76ers were a team that were interested in trying to get him. We heard all about Joel Embiid pushing for Bradley Beal. They ultimately wound up getting James Harden. I think most likely the 76ers, I mean, you never say never in the NBA, but with Harden, I mean, I guess you could package up Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle, but most likely the 76ers are not going to be a landing spot for Beal. Well, it would take them packaging.
Tobias Harris becomes your matching salary, right? But it's tough too because they don't necessarily have the asset base to go get him. You'd have to it's going to have that would at a minimum be Maxey or Thibault, if not both. Because at that point, if you're Washington, you kind of know you have them over their barrel, right? Of, hey, we know what you want to do, so we're going to hold out, for everything we can get from you. But yeah, I mean, I don't count out Daryl Morey either. But again, I think exactly what you said. I think he just sticks in Washington, and then maybe a year or two from now, kind of like where we're thinking Damian Lillard's head might be at, reevaluate in a year or two and say, all right, you know what, this isn't going the way I want. And I think at that point, both of those guys are in such similar spots where I don't think anybody holds it against them as far as like, hey, we get it. Now, if it was we turned down a monster package because you said you wanted to stay, and now a year later you're not as good and we trade you, that might get you a little negative feedback there. But I mean, as of we know right now, that's not where this is at.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So we'll see. And look, Kristaps Porzingis has had his moments. The Lakers know a little too well. But maybe maybe there's reason why Bradley Beal is looking at the Wizards and being optimistic about this team moving forward and into the future and all of that. And like we've said, it's become more and more of a rarity for players to stick with one team for the entirety of their NBA careers. And so part of me is kind of rooting for that, even though I don't have a dog in the fight in terms of the Washington Wizards, but. No, it's nice to see something go against the grain a little bit in terms of player movement, seeing a player stay put potentially for their entire career. It's like Damian Lillard may ultimately wind up doing with the Portland Trail Blazers. I think there's a little bit of nostalgia that gets triggered with that.
Yeah, I think too, there's definitely that too, right? We love that. I mean, Dirk, right? 21 years, I think, with the Mavs, right? We all love that, that kind of thing there. But I think the other part to consider here is the Wizards weren't bad earlier in the year, and then things kind of completely fell apart with them, and maybe they look like, all right, if we can get a better fitting point guard, for whatever reason, Spencer Dinwiddie did not work there. He's been great in Dallas, but did not work there. And if they look at it and say, all right, hey, we got Porzingis, we got Kuzma, we got Caldwell Pope, we got Beal, get a functional point guard in here. You still got Hachimura and Avdia. You can look at that and say that's a play-in team. They can, fight to at least get in the play, and if not better, if everything, goes really well. So, that might be part of it too. I thought the Shams brought back the quote from Bradley Beal from March 3rd, basically saying Tommy Shepard, Ted Leonsis, we're all good. We know what this summer is. And that to me is, we got to get it right. Otherwise, I'm going to bounce.
Yep. Let's move on. And speaking, we talked about Damian Lillard. Let's move to Portland. Jerami Grant is a target for the Portland Trail Blazers. And one of the things that they might try to include is the 2022 pick from the New Orleans Pelicans, their first rounder, if the Blazers get that pick. And we'll see, this will be one of the storylines watching through the end of the season. But we've talked about this, that the Blazers, they made some big moves at the trade deadline. They made a number of moves. You can argue about the value. I said that, especially in the Norman Powell trade, I didn't feel like they got enough value. But the challenge now for them is not taking those pieces and using those things to bring in young players. The challenge now, because they've made the decision they're going to keep Damian Lillard, is taking the stuff that they got in those trades, and figuring out a way to get better, figuring out a way to build a better team, a team that fits better around Damian Lillard and give him a shot to win a championship. And apparently Jerami Grant, who was a very hot name at the trade deadline this past year, is going to be at the top of their list, or at least near the top of their list. What do you think about this strategy, Keith? Going after a guy like Jerami Grant, does he become, with the emergence of Anthony Simons, a nice fit for the Blazers with Lillard moving forward? Can that bring them up a tier or two in the West?
Yeah, I think it can. I think, what you're basically looking at there is you would have Josh Hart and Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons. I think probably a re-signed Yusuf Nurkic. My guess is when he basically shut it down recently, my thought process was that was being done in conjunction with the front office of the Trailblazers to say, all right, let's get this reset. We're all going to come back healthy. And then from there, it's how where they fill out. Remember, we were all looking at it and saying, why have they not bought out Eric Bledsoe at the trade deadline? I now wonder if they're not even going to buy him out next year. If they're going to say, hey, at least temporarily, we're going to stay as an over the cap team and then use him as a trade number. And how that would work is his contract is only guaranteed for 3.9 million. So that's the most they could use him for in a trade. But it is a full number of 19.4 million. And you could up that guarantee to any number in between that 3.9 and that 19.4 if you needed to. The other option is they could waive him and stretch that money. They've not been opposed to doing that in the past. That's why they have old friend Andrew Nicholson on the books for 2 more seasons after this. But it would only be 1.3 million a year to stretch that 3.9 he's owed. So they've got a lot of options the way they could do this. But yeah, Lillard, Hart, Nurkic, Grant, Simons, that's not a bad base to start from, especially when you look at kind of who else you're competing with around the play-in level there. And then let's not count out Nasir Little had a nice little jump this year. Maybe one of these other guys that you're playing right now show something pops going into next season. But yeah, it's going to be one of those teams to watch for sure. Is going to be Portland because there's just a ton of different ways this can go down.
And then we should note that, as Shams mentioned, look, this is the 2022 Pelicans pick could be a big piece to any kind of a Jerami Grant trade. And according to Shams, according to Real GM, this is the situation with the pick. It's protected 1 through 4 and 15 through 30. So it has to be 5 through 14 in order for it to fall into the hands of the Blazers. So that's what they're looking for. Get that pick, package that up with whatever you need to in order to go get Jerami Grant, and then off you go. I do think, though, based on what we saw at the trade deadline, the amount of interest in Jerami Grant, and based on how limited the free agent class is this year, there's going to be a lot of suitors once again. I think the market is going to be hot for Jerami Grant again, which means Portland is probably going to be in a bidding war. And so it's not a foregone conclusion that they've got the pieces to land him. It's possible for another team to come in because everybody looks for 3-and-D wings that are switchy, that things Jerami Grant can do. Another team could come in and blow their offer out of the water if they so choose.
Well, and one other thing I'll add that Shams added too, little throwaway line at the end of the paragraph. Grant is eligible for a 4-year, $112 million contract extension. That's not just a throwaway line. It sounds like it, but that is if you're going to trade for Jerami Grant, it may not be that full amount, but be prepared to give him a pretty healthy contract extension because that's where this is headed. That's an average of $28 million a year. So let's see where that goes. But that's one of those other things, right? Is hey, you're willing to also sign him because otherwise you're trading him and then you're trading him in his trading for him in his walk year, and that's dangerous. So you better be prepared to figure out that extension. And unlike I said before, Bradley Beal's not an extension candidate. Grant is because he's very, very unlikely to command a full max deal as a free agent. So for him, locking in, even if it was $25 million annually, that's a pretty good number for Jerami Grant.
All right, let's talk about a guy we've been on this whole season. We've been saying Isaiah Thomas. He's an NBA player. Needs to be on a team somewhere. He's bounced around a bunch of different locations this year. He's been in the G League. Every time he's gone down to the G League, he's shown that he's clearly just too good to be in the G League. He goes for 40-plus points or whatever.
Only by a lot.
Yes, by just a little bit. The Hornets are pretty happy with him. We still don't know if they're going to keep him long-term. He's on a second 10-day contract, but it's sounding like he's really providing value in terms of not just what he does on the floor, but also veteran leadership. So that's a good sign. Now, again, that doesn't mean they're keeping him for the rest of the year. We'll see where all of that goes, but it sounds like it's moving in that direction. And again, fingers crossed. You and I, Keith, both have been saying that we wanted him to stick with an NBA team somewhere. Hopefully this is it with the Hornets.
Yeah, agreed. He's actually played well on the court too, and as you said, all reports are they love the way he's worked with Terry Rozier, who he obviously played with in Boston, but also LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, that kind of young Hornets core. But in the 6 games he's played with them, 13.5 minutes a night off the bench, 9 points per game, 45.5% from three, and 44% overall. So not bad. Overall, his assists are down from what you usually see out of him, but that's more a function of he's playing 13 and a half minutes per game, and he's primarily playing in a get in there and score role is what the Hornets have asked of him. So, I think that this is big. So, yeah, let me check my calendar here because I think it's tomorrow. It is tomorrow, Tuesday the 22nd, that his 10-day second 10-day contract expires. So he'll get in today's game with them. They're playing the Pelicans, and then basically the Hornets have to decide, do we want to keep him or not? Unless there's a hardship situation, you can only have guys on a 10-day contract for two of them, and then you have to sign them for the rest of the year. Hornets are not in a hardship situation, so they would have to sign him for the rest of the season.
All right, let's move on here. Let's get to, well, there's some more injury stuff to get into. But this is positive. Jarrett Allen. Jarrett Allen hopefully will be back within 3 weeks. The Cavs are going to need him come playoff time. Again, this was a tough blow towards the end of the season to be dealing with a finger injury, but now Jarrett Allen expected to be back within 3 weeks. We talked about on our previous show that he elected not to do surgery on it. They decided that wasn't necessary, just going to let it heal up 3 weeks. Hopefully he's back and good to go. And yeah, then the Cavs can be off and running for the playoffs. This is still a team to watch for playoff time, and I'm going to get a look at them tonight. They're going to play my Lakers. But this is one of those teams that everybody likes to get behind the underdog, right? And that's what this Cavs team is. So they're going to definitely be a team to keep an eye on come playoff time, but they're going to need a guy like Jarrett Allen in there if they're actually going to make some noise in the postseason this year.
Yeah, and they've slid in the standings. They're 5-5 in their last 10 games. They're now down to 6th. They're only a half game behind Chicago, but they're now 2.5 behind Boston, who has moved up to quite a bit in the standings, up to 4th now. Are the red hot Boston Celtics? And I noticed you haven't brought them up in 2 shows worth of time together, but I'm going to bring it up. So I'm not going to let you escape that quite that easily. But yeah, I mean, the Cavs, this is tough. And they're only a game ahead of Toronto for that play-in spot. And again, you want to be that top 6 because you want to get in, because you're not favoring them against Brooklyn, right? I mean, even at home, because that's actually probably worse, because then Kyrie Irving can play in Cleveland. And then it's probably kind of a toss-up between Charlotte and Atlanta in the second playing game if the Cavs are down in the playing tournament, because problem with the Hornets or the Hawks is they're shooting it well. You can be in for a long night. Yeah. Just, they're the kind of team that gets hot for a game or two. They make a little run in the play-in and they're in. So that's going to be your challenge if you're Cleveland, is trying to hold off. And I think they might have 1 game left with the Raptors, if I remember right. So that may let me check that while we're talking here, because that if so, that becomes a pretty massive.
I've got it. They do. That's coming up on Thursday.
They do on Thursday in Toronto. So that's quietly a pretty huge game for them. But they've got a couple games with the Magic left. Those should be fairly winnable. A game with the Knicks. And then you get to the end of the year, who knows what some of these teams will be looking like as far as playing guys or sitting guys. But danger zone, I guess, best way to put it for the Cavs.
I'll comment on your Celtics in just a second, but Dean Wade, just to finish off the Cavs here. Dean Wade, partial meniscus tear, hoping to be back for the start of the playoffs. Again, partial, that's important. But partial meniscus tear, he's been kind of a versatile guy for them. Jarrett Allen is, of course, the more important piece here, but the Cavs are going to need everything that they've got come playoff time. So hopefully he is indeed back for the start of the playoffs.
Yeah, Dean Wade, I know there's might be even listeners to our show or viewers of our show may be like, who? But Dean Wade's played in 51 games for Cleveland, 19 minutes per game. He has kind of been the plug-in guy for Markkanen, Mobley, Allen, Love. If any of them are ever out of the lineup, Dean Wade's the guy they go to slide into that spot. He plays all 3 front court positions in that kind of goofy jumbo sized Cleveland groupings, and he's been really important. He's up to 36% from 3 this year on 3 attempts per game. He's a pretty solid defender, can move his feet fairly well. So that's not one of these who losses, like that's actually a pretty big loss for Cleveland if he can't get back, especially if Allen is at all limited or anything. Because now all of a sudden you go from this deep front court down to, you're getting down to Mobley, Markin, and Love, and that kind of becomes, that's what we got to work with the rest of the way when you've been playing three bigs together quite a bit.
And we got through a conversation about Dean Wade without making a Dwayne Wade joke. So that was, I give ourselves a
I always think of I feel like Dean Wade. Maybe it's just Dean Martin from my mom when I was growing up, but it always just he sounds like a 50s like one of those like singers that like was a singer but also made some movies and stuff. Like that's what he sounds like. The slick back hair and super cool
the Rat Pack
guy. But yeah, yeah, exactly.
Hey, I'm here in Vegas. So your Celtics.
Yeah, there it is.
Let me preface this here. So obviously, from the Lakers side of things, Keith, I don't want good things for your Celtics. You don't want good things for my Lakers. We've come to terms with this. We're okay with it.
Yeah.
We've made peace with that fact. However, I will say
we own our petty.
That as somebody who has watched a lot of bad basketball this season, not by choice, but has watched a lot of bad basketball this season, the tenacity that the Celtics bring on the defensive side of the floor, it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch them just really get after teams and lock down and just the hustle that they attack every possession with. It's obviously a stark contrast to what I've been watching, but or at least most nights. But you got to give them credit for what they've done out there. It's been really, really impressive. And again, just from a scheme-wise, looking at it, we've talked about this previously, just from a tactical perspective, the fact that they've taken a team playing two bigs the way that they have, and one of them being Al Horford, who's not the quickest guy, but he's done a lot better than you would have expected. Sure. They've overcome a lot of the challenges that you would expect them to have on paper and turned themselves into this defensive juggernaut. And who knows where they go come playoff time. So, I mean, incredible stuff. Hats off to them. They've been absolutely phenomenal. Again, it kills me to say it, but they've really been good and actually been fun to watch in this run that they've had, particularly because of what they do on the defensive side of the floor. It's almost unlike anything else that we're seeing in the league from a defensive standpoint right now, which is very cool.
Yeah. Other than when they have Peyton Pritchard in the game, they full on switch every single thing and live with whatever the resulting on ball matchup is. Occasionally when Pritchard is in there, they'll try to jump switch, which means you're like pre-switching him out of a play where you can tell his guy's going to screen. Or if he gets on a switch and the other team's trying to set him up, they'll try to scram him out of that. So they'll either jump switch or they'll switch back, and those kind of things are getting super technical. But he's the only guy that they at all ever try to cover for. Everybody else in their 9-man rotation live with whatever it is, and we're just going to run with it. Maybe if it's Robert Williams guarding a point guard, it is what it is. If it's Marcus Smart guarding a center, it is what it is. We're going to live with it. And it's not just the style, but the numbers back it up, because you can see it with the eye test. Like you said, you can see them all over the place. There are times when it almost feels like they've got 6 guys on the court playing defense, because they're all pretty long too, and they're all pretty quick. But they're first in defensive rating. They're also first in true like points per game allowed, which that's outdated because that doesn't factor in pace and all those kind of things. But if you go to the defensive rating, which does, they're first in that. They are first in opponents' field goal percentage. They're first in opponent 3-point percentage. They're first in the only team in the NBA that is holding opponents under 50% on 2-pointers this year. So that leads to the rim protection of Robert Williams, Al Horford, even Grant Williams. Grant Williams got a little out of his mind last night asking to be called. Did you see this?
I didn't. I was on the plane.
He wants to be called Batman because he locks up the Joker. Because when he plays Nikola Jokic, because he's had some good games against him. So
if I was a Celtics fan, that was hard. That was difficult to say.
Oh man, that was hard. Yeah, you had to choke that out.
If I was I would be a little bit uncomfortable with him saying that. Now look, most likely, let's say the Celtics get all the way to the finals. Most likely, it's not Denver waiting on the other side, right? So you probably don't have to worry about it. But don't poke the bear. Just don't do that. It reminds me of Ruben Patterson calling himself the Kobe stopper. Like, don't do that. Don't. And again, Grant Williams has done just fine. No, not taking a shot at him at all. He's been good this season, but don't give yourself a nickname that you stop the guy who's the reigning MVP. It's usually not a good idea.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. Yeah, it's just, but it kind of gives you the sense of the confidence level these guys are playing with right now. Mm-hmm. But the cool thing is they had a little bit of fun with that. But after every single game, you get Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum basically saying the same thing: is we're just taking one game at a time. Mm-hmm. They'll rattle off 10 things that they didn't do well in the game. And, we got to figure this stuff out. But I mean, all the numbers are adding up to, I think they're now, they're third best point differential in the league, mm-hmm. as well behind the Suns and the Jazz. And that tells you they're killing these teams. And even in these road games, they went on a West Coast trip. And anytime you do that opposite coast trip, you kind of think, all right, if we can get to 500, that feels pretty good about the trip. And they blew out the Warriors, blew out the Kings, and then beat the Nuggets. They beat the Nuggets so bad last night. Michael Malone benched the starters to start the second half. He did not come out with any of the starters on the floor, mostly because he was trying to send a message like, hey, you're playing unacceptable effort level and all that stuff. And they came in, they made a little bit of a run, but it never got really close again. And they're just hammering these teams, and now they're off to OKC to close out a 4-game trip. Classic trap game.
Yep.
There, with this one, and they're sitting out. Smart's going to sit out. He's going to sinus infection that he's dealing with. Robert Williams got some knee soreness, so he's going to sit out. So we'll see if something happens. And Celtics fans quite well remember last year when they had OKC and Moses Brown looked like prime Bill Russell against them and ended up winning. But yeah, all right, that was more than enough Celtics talk. I know nobody wants to hear
it. All right, well, we'll move on to we've got. Two negative stories. I should have structured this differently, but Zion Williamson.
That's all right. We'll close out with a positive. I have a positive.
Okay, great. Okay, that's fantastic. So Zion Williamson done for the season. Sounds like he's not going to play. Which at this point, again, we're at that point of the year where any kind of setback for anybody, that's it. Their season's over. Zion Williamson, we went from he's going to be back by the start of the season or a few weeks into the season to his season is over. And just from an NBA perspective, he's one of the bright young stars in the league. This is not what you wanted to see at all. Of course, health-wise, if this is what it takes in order to get him healthy for next season, then of course, if you're the Pelicans, you do it. We've talked about it does set up contractually some interesting things. He's only played in 80+ games. So what do you do with him in terms of an extension, in terms of trying to lock him up long-term? How comfortable?
And those games were so good.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, I shouldn't say the problem. The hard part, because he was so good and so dominant when he played, but he's barely played. So unfortunately, a lost season now for Zion Williamson.
Yep. Yeah, Zion Williamson, Ben Simmons, Jamal Murray, Jonathan Isaac. Those are 4 guys just off the top of my head. TJ Warren, another guy. 5 guys, 5 pretty good players. Not going to have seen them at all this entire season. Not 1 minute from those guys. Maybe Simmons gets back. Maybe Murray gets back. But it sounds like Zion's not going to play. We know Isaac and Warren are not going to play this year. So, that's tough. And then the other one, I think you were going to Dame.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Damian Lillard's going to be shut down for the rest of this season as well. Not a big surprise, right? Portland is they're not exactly making a run at that final play-in spot. And they're now 3.5 out behind the Pelicans and the Lakers. So they'd have to climb the Spurs and make up that ground. They're 1-9 in their last 10. They've lost 4 in a row. They're clearly reprioritizing for draft pick reasons. So, and that's the right thing to do. Sit Dame out. We already talked about it with the Jerami Grant stuff. Hit a full reset into this summer and, see if you can get right back in that mix in the West and, you have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That's it. And again, so that
all
was
right,
not
want
a
me
surprise.
To close you out? Yeah. All right. You want to close out with something kind of look slightly sad, but more celebration?
Yeah.
Jamal Crawford
yes, I saw that.
Is retiring. Yeah, he announced his retirement today on social media. 20-year NBA career for Jamal Crawford. won Sixth Man of the Year award 3 times, tied with Lou Williams of the Atlanta Hawks. I have no issue if the NBA was to rename that the Crawford Williams Sixth Man of the Year award. I think that would be great, as opposed to being like the, I don't know, what would you call it? The, like Sprite Zero Cherry Diet Soda Sixth Man of the Year award or something like that.
Right.
If you wanted to do it, the Crawford Williams award, I would really like it. So, but yeah, great career for Jamal Crawford. One of the best ball handling guards that we've seen. Could always get to that behind the back dribble into that jump shot and in the lane and stuff, and just an absolute dominant scoring weapon off the bench for a number of years. So happy trails to him. My guess is we see him. He's already done some media stuff, and we see him pop up even more in the media.
Absolutely. He's the kind of guy where at the beginning of his career, kind of like Lou Williams, there was a little bit of an attempt to like, hey, we're going to make this guy a point guard, and he's going to be the lead ball handler, until finally they just went, let's just let him do what he does. Come off the bench and get buckets. And Lou Williams had the same trajectory there.
And nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, 20-year career he carved out, made a ton of money, won a ton of games, had a lot of success. Same with Lou Williams. Is approaching that same kind of numbers. So nothing wrong at all if you embrace that. Hey, that's what my job is. Great, let's go. We tend to get stuck on those things sometimes, but this is good news. So happy trails to Jamal Crawford. All the best to him and his family moving forward.
Absolutely. All right, I want to finish off with a podcast review that we got over on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
This is from Warsome said, I have been watching and listening to you guys. Oh, I'm sorry. The title, something all NBA fans should listen to. All right. Said, I've been watching and listening to you guys since you did the collaborations on Lakers Nation, and I really enjoy the move to a separate channel and podcast. This has been great as a fan of both teams, considering my first NBA game watched was the finals between the Lakers and the Celtics in 2010. I've learned so much about the league and how it runs, and now use this mindset in how I break down the NFL as well. I hope you guys continue to do this podcast until you guys want to stop. I will definitely be listening until that happens. That's a fantastic review. First of all, that blew me away. He's a Lakers and Celtics fan.
Yeah, that's weird.
Don't
tell people that.
How is that possible?
Be careful where you say that. Yeah, that's not a real thing. But, just say you love basketball. let's leave it at that. But yes, we will 100% take that, and I will say nothing stopping us anytime soon.
Yep.
We're gonna keep going. Even when we are separated by almost an entire landmass known as the United States, we're still cranking out content for you guys. So yeah. Thank you guys so much. Those ratings and reviews do mean a lot. They help us a lot. We do still have a lot of people who are podcast listeners only, and they love it. And for you guys on the YouTube, we love you. The YouTube. My daughter's gonna murder me now. The YouTube.
On the line.
Yeah, it's really. Yeah, that's it. On the line. Yeah, I love that.
I watched it the other night.
Man. When we do movies, we'll get into that. It was on the other day, and I caught some of it. So, but yeah, thank you guys so much for all the support. We love you guys, and we'll be back to it. We're cranking up. We've got off-season preview stuff we're going to get into too. Eventually, we'll get into some draft coverage as well. I have thoughts. I've been watching a ton of college basketball, so I'm excited to fly in there and pop in on that stuff. But yeah, good times all around, and more of it's right.
All right, everybody. If you are watching us on the YouTube, make sure you do subscribe. Don't forget to turn on notifications as well. Until next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.